but Iran is striking British interests nonetheless and putting British people at huge risk, along with our allies across the region. That is the situation we face today. Our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them, and it is my duty to protect British lives. We have British jets in the air as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes. But the only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots, or the launchers which are used to fire the missiles. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk, and hitting countries that have not been involved. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region. And we will also bring experts from Ukraine together with our own experts to help Gulf partners shoot down Iranian drones attacking them. I want to be very clear. We all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. We were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now. But Iran is pursuing a scorched earth strategy, so we are supporting the collective self-defense of our allies and our people in the region, because that is our duty to the British people. It is the best way to eliminate the urgent threat and prevent the situation spiralling further. This is the British government protecting British interests and British lives.
France and Belgium have seized a Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the North Sea. Ukraine says this is an important step in stopping Moscow from fighting its war. Pressure on Russia is growing. French President Emmanuel Macron reported the completion of joint French-Belgian operation to seize a tanker belonging to Russia's shadow fleet. According to him, this is a serious blow to the shadow fleet. The LSA Palace stated that French Navy helicopters assisted Belgian forces in capturing oil tankers that was under sanctions. Macron assured Europeans are firmly determined to cut off sources of funding for Russian war of aggression against Ukraine through the enforcement of sanctions. It is known that the vessel detained by Belgium has been on a European list of sanctions and ships linked to the shadow oil tanker fleet and contributing to Russia's energy revenues. The ship transported crude oil, petroleum products, or mineral materials originating from Russia. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha welcomed Belgium's seizure of Russian shadow fleet tanker and urged other countries to follow its example. Quote, "We welcome Belgium's decisive step in seizing tanker. Such resolute and justified actions are necessary to deprive Russia of its resources needed to continue its aggression." Belgium Defense Minister Theo Franken said the vessel is being escorted to the port of Zeebrugge, where it will be officially arrested and confiscated. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also welcomed the operation. According to him, the vessel has long been under US, EU and UK sanctions, but continued illegally transporting Russian oil using a false flag and forged documents. Russia's shadow fleet has become a key Kremlin tool for maintaining all revenues under Western sanctions. According to Western analytical centers, these vessels now transport the majority of Russia's seaborne oil exports. Analysts of the Center of Strategic and International Studies estimate that 3.7 million barrels of oil per day are transported through a network of tankers with ownership, altered flags, and questionable insurance, about 65% of all Russian seaborne crude oil shipments. The Economist reported that by the end of the 2025, volumes carried by the shadow fleet were approaching 5 million barrels per day. This effectively means shadow tankers dominate the export structure. Researchers at the Keir School of Economics reached similar conclusions. In 2024, such shipments accounted for 70% of Russian maritime oil exports, 4.1 million barrels a day. The fleet scale is also striking. The network may include up to 1,000 vessels, from aging tankers to newly acquired ships operating through intermediaries and offshore companies. This infrastructure enables Russia to maintain export flows to Asia and other markets despite Western sanctions. In practice, the shadow fleet has evolved into a parallel global oil trade. As long as volumes remain at several million a day, it continues to play a critical role in replenishing the Russian state budget. After the introduction of sweeping Western sanctions, Russia faced a risk of sharp decline in oil revenues, a key source of state budget funding. It was under these conditions that the so-called shadow fleet emerged, a parallel maritime transport system designed to preserve exports. The primary driver was the price cap policy by G7 and EU. Under G7 and EU decisions, Western companies are prohibited from ensuring, financing, servicing Russian oil shipments if oil is sold above the calling price. This has effectively limited Moscow's access to traditional global shipments, infrastructure, insurance clubs, European tankers, and port services. In response, Russian traders and affiliated structures began mass purchases of older tankers through intermediates, registering them under flags of convenience and shifting insurance to alternative jurisdictions. Gradually, a network of vessels with opaque ownership structures and minimal transparency emerged, what is now referred to as shadow fleet. After losing most of the European market, Russia redirected supplies to Asia, China, and India. Longer roads require more vessels and more complex logistics, including ship-to-ship oil transfers and open waters, often outside strict regulatory oversight. The use of the shadow fleet became not the matter of choice, but a survival tool for Russians. At the same time, the interception of such vessels by EU significantly complicates Moscow's ability to use them freely and with impunity to sell its oil. Meanwhile, United Kingdom stated it will involve Ukrainian experts in intercepting Iranian drones in the Persian Gulf. This was announced by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Starmer said Britain was not involved in US and Israeli strikes on Iran, believing that the best path for the region and world is a negotiated settlement. However, he stressed that Iran poses a serious risk to the British people, and its allies in the Middle East and partners in the Persian Gulf are asking for protection. The British Prime Minister stated that the country will involve Ukrainian experts alongside its own specialists to help partners in the Persian Gulf shoot down Iranian drones. In addition, Starmer authorized the US to use British bases for operations. This shift in position followed an Iranian attack on British base in Cyprus. According to foreign media, France is also considering more assertive measures against Iran. Meanwhile, Iran struck French and British bases despite the fact that nations had not participated in the initial strikes against Iran. French Defense Minister Catherine Vautrin reported damage to the country's naval base in the United Arab Emirates, quoting, "The hangar of our naval base was damaged during a drone attack targeting the port of Abu Dhabi." Ukraine Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said the Royal Air Force base at Turkey in Cyprus was targeted by drone strike. According to Cooper, the attack involved a Shahed drone, but no one was injured. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said Paris is ready to participate in the defense of its Middle Eastern partners amid escalation. He expressed support and solidarity with United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iraq, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, and Jordan, adding that France is ready to take part in defending these states. President Trump announced at least a month-long military campaign against Iran and warns that military casualties are inevitable. Trump also said Iran had proposed resuming negotiations with him, although Tehran officially denies engaging in diplomacy. Meanwhile, Pentagon fears that missile supplies may not be sufficient for prolonged war. What this could ultimately lead to and what the US will do next was discussed with Professor of International Politics at the Dublin University, Scott Lucas.
I think it's a vital one that analysts need to get a hold of, because when this operation hit on Saturday, I woke up to it and got the news flash. And my immediate thought was, okay, this is the Israel-U.S. attempted regime change, again, through targeted assassinations, the political and military leadership. And we know that Israel had tried to do this back in June 2025. But as this has gone on, I actually didn't know. I think the Trump camp and the Netanyahu government are on different pages here. They can share different pages because they have a common interest in limiting the Iran regime. But for Israel, I think, or at least for Netanyahu, this is like, we want to wipe out the regime. We don't want any elements of it left. We don't know who's going to take power, but we're just going to knock out everyone and then hope that we get a different type of leadership who are not threatening us. For the Americans, for the Trump camp, it's not about regime change, because look at the signals that have come out, not just from Donald Trump, but from advisors, which is, okay, if Iran will come back into talks, and if Iran will give us what we want, this can stop. And what is it the Americans want? What is it that they wanted all the way up to last Thursday in the talks? They wanted an end to Iran's nuclear program completely. Not just no military program, no civilian program, no enrichment at all. And that goes beyond what was agreed in 2015 when Iran agreed with the 5+1 powers, including the US, that it could have some enrichment up to about 3.67% of uranium. Now, no enrichment at all. And then the Americans wanted Iran to give up or limit its ballistic missiles in terms of the number, in terms of the range, in terms of the firepower. And the Iranians said, no, we'll discuss the nuclear program with you and limits on nuclear activities, but we're not going to discuss the missiles. So on Thursday, after the Geneva talks, the American envoys, real estate developer Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, they just walked away. They didn't make any comment. And I think at that point, the decision is made that they're going to go to war with Iran. But it could be that they're going to Iran after killing some of the top leaders so that the remaining leaders in the government agree to their demands. And again, there's a precedent for this. Ultimately, it was not regime change in Venezuela. For all the talk of regime change for months before the US operations, the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, the president, was not followed by getting rid of the rest of the regime. The vice president became president, acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, the interior minister stayed, the defense minister stayed. And indeed, we have found out subsequently that the regime, in order to survive, gave up Maduro. They told the Americans, okay, if you kidnap Maduro, we're not going to stand in your way. In this case, a little bit different. I don't think anybody in the Iranian regime said, okay, come in and kill the supreme leader. But I do think those that are left, if they choose, can surrender to the United States and still stay in power.
And most final question, I would really appreciate as short answer as possible. Why didn't French and British governments support this operation from the day one? Don't you think that they have already been affected by this war because of most recent strikes on their military sites? And do you feel that both UK and France can change their positions?
They didn't support it initially, especially in the UK case, because the war's illegal. The UK government's legal advisors gave them the position paper, which stated what was fairly clear, and that is you can only go to war, what we call a preemptive war, if you face an imminent threat from a country. Well, Iran does not yet have a military nuclear program, certainly doesn't have the 150, 200 nuclear warheads Israel has. It was not threatening an immediate attack on the United States or on American troops in the region. It was not threatening an attack on Israel. So you had no justification to go in at that point, and you certainly had no justification to go in for targeted assassinations of a country's leader. So if you don't have legal justification, that makes it a bit tricky. And again, the UK back in 2003, they knew that war was illegal. At the end of the day, Blair joined it. I think this time his successor said, we're not going to go that same route. So they did not give permission for the U.S. to use the base of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. But now the UK has had to change its position because they cannot stand aside if Iran winds up killing American troops, and 4 have died so far. They can't stand aside if Iran hits the Gulf states or other countries. And so they have given permission for the U.S. to use Diego Garcia, that base in the Indian Ocean, albeit supposedly for defensive operations. In other words, to hit Iran's missile launchers. The UK is already being pulled into being an accomplice of this U.S.-Israel war, even if they didn't want to be in this position. I think France is a little bit different. They have a slightly different relationship with the United States. They don't have the same shared military facilities. So I think the French position lands on the fact that they'll keep calling for de-escalation. They will criticize the Iranian retaliation and strikes, but they'll use that word of de-escalation to also signal to Trump and Israel that they need to back off of the aim of regime change or regime surrender.
That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and glory to Ukraine.